There are moments in life when the world begins to shift so slowly that you don't even notice it happening. Moments when reality feels like it's breathing just slightly out of rhythm with you. When what you see starts to feel heavier, darker, quieter, as though something invisible is standing just behind the surface of what you think is real. We spend our whole lives trusting our senses, believing that what we see in the mirror is truth, that the reflection looking back is nothing more than light and glass and repetition. But what if it's more than that? What if the mirror isn't just showing you what's there, but something waiting for you to see it? Something that learns from you, that studies every detail, every emotion, every hesitation. I used to believe mirrors were harmless, ordinary objects, part of the background of daily life, something you pass without thought. But over time I started to notice things, little moments when my reflection didn't quite move the same way. My head tilted slower, my eyes blinked later, my smile lingered longer. I thought it was exhaustion, maybe a trick of light or my imagination, but the unease began to grow like a quiet storm in my chest, the kind that whispers instead of screams, and before I could understand what was happening, I realized that the reflection wasn't following me anymore. It was watching me with intent, like a separate being, wearing my face every time I stood in front of it. I could feel something behind the glass, something aware, patient, silent. It felt like it knew more about me than I did. It remembered things I had forgotten, feelings I had buried, pieces of myself I didn't want to face. And every time I looked away I could feel its eyes still fixed on me, waiting for the next time I would return to it. Because reflections always find you no matter how far you run. You see them in windows, in puddles, in the darkness of your own eyes. And the more you try to ignore them, the closer they get. I didn't know then that something as simple as a reflection could twist into something else, something alive. It started quietly with little delays, little changes, but it grew until I began to question what was real. I stopped trusting my own image, stopped believing that the person in the glass was truly me. And when I tried to look deeper, when I tried to find answers in that cold surface, I found something that smiled when I didn't, something that moved, when I was still, something that looked like me but wasn't. And that was the night everything changed. That was the night my reflection started to lie. It began in the most ordinary way, in the kind of moment you never expect to remember, the kind that slips past unnoticed until it becomes something you cannot forget. I was standing before the mirror late at night, the room quiet, except for the faint hum of the old light above me, the kind of silence that feels heavy, like it is waiting for something. I was brushing my hair, slow, distracted, barely looking at myself, when I saw it. The tiniest flicker of movement, a hesitation that should not have been there. My reflection lagged behind me for just a second, so small, so impossible that I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. I tried to laugh it off. I told myself it was exhaustion. I had been working too much, sleeping too little. Maybe the mirror was old, maybe the light was bending weird. But when I looked back, something inside me whispered that it was not just that something was off, and it had been for a while. I started to notice the next few nights. I tried to ignore the mirror. I walked past it without looking, but the pull was there, like a magnetic thread dragging my eyes back to the glass. Sometimes I could swear I felt it stare, even when my back was turned. The air behind me would feel heavier, colder, like someone was watching, waiting. The more I avoided it, the stronger the feeling became, until one night I could not resist anymore. I turned to face it slowly, my pulse racing, the air thick with silence, and there it was, staring back, with a faint smile that I had not made. It felt wrong, in a way I could not explain, the kind of wrong that crawls under your skin and stays there. I leaned closer, studying every inch of that face, trying to convince myself it was still mine. But the longer I looked, the more I felt like I was staring at a stranger. The eyes seemed too deep, too knowing, the skin too still, as if it was alive, but pretending to be me. My throat tightened. I tried to blink, to move, to turn away, but something in the glass held me there, trapped between the real and the reflection. I could feel my thoughts unraveling, as though the mirror was peeling away the layers of who I thought I was, searching for something beneath, something it recognized better than I did every night. After that, the fear grew. The reflection began to feel more alive than I did. Sometimes I caught its lips twitching, as if whispering words I could not hear. Other times it smiled faintly when I was not smiling at all. I began to wonder if maybe it was not copying me anymore. Maybe it was waiting for me to become it. Maybe I already had. The eyes were the first thing that truly made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. They had always been familiar, a reflection of who I was, or at least who I believed I was. But lately, they began to change in ways I could not explain. They no longer looked warm or alive. Instead, they seemed hollow, dark, and distant. As if something inside them had stopped trying to pretend. I remember standing before the mirror one night, staring straight into those eyes, and feeling an unfamiliar chill crawl up my spine. They looked back at me, not as a reflection, but as something aware, something patient and hungry at first. I thought it was the lighting, maybe the dim yellow glow of the bulb above me was making shadows play tricks on my vision. I blinked hard, splashed water on my face, leaned in closer, but nothing changed. The eyes in the mirror seemed deeper than mine. They shimmered differently, not with life, but with something sharp and cold, like the glint of metal under moonlight. It was as if they were studying me, measuring me, waiting for me to notice the difference. And when I finally did, I could not look away every time I stared into the mirror. I felt an odd pull, like gravity dragging my thoughts into those dark pupils. They seemed endless, bottomless, like tunnels leading somewhere I did not want to go. And yet my curiosity kept me there, trapped in that silent exchange. There were moments when I could swear. The reflection blinked slower than I did, or its gaze shifted slightly before mine did, subtle little betrayals of time that made my chest tighten and my breath quicken. The more I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, the more convincing the reflection became. Then something strange began to happen when I looked into those eyes. I started to see things I did not remember, things that felt like memories but did not belong to me. Faces I did not know, places I had never been, flashes of moments that felt real but wrong. It was like the mirror was showing me a version of myself from somewhere else, a version that had seen too much and done too little to stop it. Those eyes began to haunt me, even when I was not in front of the mirror. I could feel them watching through glass, through darkness, through my own mind. It got to the point where I could no longer trust what I saw. When I looked at my own reflection, the eyes looking back did not feel like mine. They carried something heavy, something ancient and cruel, and when I leaned closer one night, trying to see if I could catch them changing, they blinked first slowly, deliberately, and when they opened again, they were smiling, without moving their mouth, and I realized that whatever was staring back was not just seeing me. It was studying me, learning from me, taking its time, waiting for the moment I would stop recognizing myself. A smile is supposed to be something warm, something familiar, something that carries comfort, but mine stopped feeling like that one night. I stood before the mirror, forcing a small smile, just to convince myself that everything was fine. And for a moment I thought it was, but then I saw it. My reflection did not smile the same way I did. It stretched wider, slower, and there was something wrong with the way the corners of its mouth curved. It was as if it was trying to imitate joy, but had never really understood what joy was. Its lips parted slightly, showing too much of its teeth, and for the first time, I realized that my own smile looked like a mask. Every time after that, when I caught sight of myself in the mirror, the smile became worse. It was not mine anymore. It was colder, thinner, and somehow cruel. I could feel it watching me whenever I moved past the glass, the corners of its lips twitching, as if it wanted to laugh at something I could not hear. I began to test it. I would grin suddenly, without warning, hoping to catch it off guard, but every time it would follow perfectly, except for that one detail, the delay, that impossible heartbeat between my movement and its response. It was always a second late, and that second felt like eternity. I remember leaning close once, trying to see if there was a difference, trying to understand why the reflection looked more alive than I felt, and I saw it, then the tiniest shiver pass over its face like a ripple through still water. It was smiling, but the eyes did not match. There was no trace of emotion behind them, no happiness, no pain, no recognition, just the cold satisfaction of something pretending too well. I whispered quietly, asking it what it wanted, but it did not move. It only smiled deeper, that same stretched and unnatural grin that made my stomach twist. Days went by, and I started to notice that the smile appeared even when I was not smiling at all. I would pass the mirror half asleep, and there it was grinning at me from the other side, sometimes faintly, sometimes wide, as if mocking me. I could feel the laughter in its silence, heavy and sharp, like it knew something I did not. I tried to cover the mirror once, but even through the fabric I could sense it. I could feel the pull, like something behind the glass was pressing forward, waiting for a chance to slip through that invisible barrier. The nights became unbearable. I would wake up in the dark, certain that I had seen it moving in the corner of the room, a pale grin suspended in the air before vanishing into the shadows, the same twisted smile that I had once thought was mine. I tried to avoid mirrors altogether, but reflections have a way of finding you in windows, in puddles, even in the black surface of a turned-off screen, and every time I saw it, the smile grew sharper, like it was feeding on my fear. Each glance became a silent battle between me and it, a war of expressions, and the terrifying truth was that I could no longer remember what my real smile even looked like. It started with whispers, faint, soft, almost too quiet to notice. At first they came when the world was silent, when the house had settled into stillness, and even the air felt heavy and unmoving. I would be lying in bed, staring into the dark, trying to convince myself that what I had seen in the mirror was nothing more than exhaustion. But then I would hear it, a sound that didn't belong. It was my own voice, whispering my name slowly, carefully, almost lovingly. I sat up thinking, maybe I had dreamed it, but then it came again from the direction of the mirror. I told myself it was the wind, the creak of wood, the hum of the night, but deep down I knew the difference between the sounds of the world and the sound of my own voice. There was something too deliberate about it, too real, like someone was standing inches from my ear, breathing words that melted before they reached. Meaning, the next night the whispers came earlier, as soon as the lights went out, and I could feel the chill from the glass like cold breath spreading through the room. When I gathered the courage to look, the reflection was waiting, its face half hidden by shadow, its lips moving slowly but silently. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel them vibrating in my skull. My own mouth was still, but its mouth kept forming shapes I did not recognize. I leaned closer and closer, trying to catch the sound, but all I heard was that deep, faint hum beneath everything else, like the air inside the mirror was alive. I asked out loud what it wanted, what it was trying to say, and for a moment it stopped. Then its lips curved into that familiar half-smile, and it whispered my name again. After that night, the whispering became constant. It followed me like an echo just out of reach. Whenever I entered the room where the mirror stood, I could hear faint murmurs behind the glass, like a conversation being held in secret. Sometimes the words would overlap my own thoughts so perfectly that I couldn't tell where they ended, and I began. I started sleeping with the lights on, but even then, I could see the faint shimmer on the mirror's surface, like a breath fogging up the glass from the inside. I tried to record it with my phone once, but when I played the video back there was only silence, and a faint distorted image of myself smiling when I knew I hadn't. It began calling me in other ways too, not just through whispers. Sometimes I would hear tapping from the mirror, like fingernails brushing the glass, gentle, rhythmic, patient. It happened mostly at night, but once I heard it in daylight, and that was worse because it proved I wasn't imagining it. I walked up to the mirror, slowly pressing my ear against the cold surface, and I swear I could hear faint laughter, not loud, not cruel, but distant, as if it was buried deep beneath layers of glass. I could feel the vibration against my skin, like something alive moving just beyond reach. I stopped speaking in my own house, afraid that the reflection was listening, because whenever I said something aloud, I would catch a faint movement in the mirror, a twitch of lips, a tilt of the head as if repeating my words back to me. I began to realize the whispers were not random. They were learning my voice, perfecting it, shaping it, so one day it would sound exactly like me. And when I finally heard it say my name in my tone, in my rhythm, without the faintest flaw, I knew it was no longer trying to communicate. It was practicing. The mirror began to take control in ways I did not notice. At first, it started small, so small, that it almost felt like imagination, like tricks of a tired mind. There were moments when I would catch my reflection moving just a little differently. Maybe the hand in the mirror would rise slower or faster than mine. Maybe it would turn its head just a little too far, but those little slips grew darker each passing day, and soon I realized that what I was seeing was not coincidence. It was intent. The reflection was not following me anymore. It was choosing its own rhythm. At first I tried to test it. I would stand before the mirror for hours, staring straight into those lifeless eyes, refusing to move, waiting for it to falter. I would lift my hand suddenly, then stop, hoping to catch it still. But sometimes it moved first, just slightly, like it knew what I was about to do before I thought maybe I was hallucinating, but then came the night that erased every doubt. The night the reflection did not wait for me to move at all. I had been sitting on the floor in front of the mirror, the lights dim and the room thick with silence, and suddenly I saw it, my reflection, taking a step forward. While I stayed perfectly still, I froze, my heartbeat thundered in my ears, and I could feel my throat dry out. My mind screamed to look away, but I couldn't. Its movement was slow, deliberate, heavy. With meaning, it was studying me, not like a copy, but like a predator, learning its prey. It tilted its head slightly, its lips parting in a faint, almost curious smile. I tried to lift my hand, but my body wouldn't respond for a moment. It felt as though I had become the reflection, and it was the one controlling the glass between us. After that moment, the world stopped feeling stable. Sometimes when I brushed my hair or reached for something, my movements felt guided, like I was following an invisible rhythm, not my own, as if the reflection had extended itself beyond the mirror, its will, seeping into me in fragments. I would find myself standing before the mirror without remembering how I got there. My eyes locked with its eyes, my body still but trembling inside, and every time I blinked, I could swear its expression changed slightly. Even though I hadn't seen it move, it began testing limits, pushing further into my world. It would mimic emotions I didn't feel, smiling when I was angry, frowning when I was calm, and the worst part was that I could feel it inside me like invisible strings, pulling at my muscles, urging me to match it. I felt drained every time I walked away, as if it had stolen a part of my energy, a fraction of my soul. I stopped turning the lights off at night, because the reflection's outline glowed faintly in the dark, like a dim figure breathing behind the glass. One morning I woke to find handprints on the mirror, faint but visible, not mine. They were reversed, like someone had pressed their hands from the inside. I tried to wipe them away, but they stayed there, no matter how hard I scrubbed it was. Then I began to notice the shift in my own body. Language when I spoke, my gestures seemed off, too precise, too practiced, like I was imitating myself. I realized the reflection wasn't just watching me anymore. It was teaching me how to move like it, how to act like it, how to become it. The glass no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a doorway, thin, fragile, pulsing with something alive. There were times when I would walk past it and see movement, even when the angle should have made it impossible. As if it no longer needed my permission to act, the connection between us grew stronger, and my reflection grew bolder. I could feel its thoughts brushing against mine in quiet moments, whispering temptations, telling me to come closer, to trust it. And each time I resisted, it pulled harder, making my reflection twitch, my eyes blur, my heart race. It was no longer pretending to copy me. It was rewriting me, reshaping the way I moved, the way I breathed, the way I existed. The fear of being replaced began as a quiet thought, one I tried to laugh off, one I told myself could never be real, but it grew inside me like a shadow, feeding on every glance I took at the mirror. I started to notice how my reflection seemed too confident, too sure of itself, while I felt weaker. Every day, there was something in its stare, something steady and patient, like it knew something I didn't like. It was waiting for me to make a mistake. At first, I thought maybe I was just imagining it. Maybe the guilt and exhaustion were twisting my thoughts. But then the feeling became too heavy, too real to ignore. There were moments when I would pass by the mirror, quickly hoping not to see anything, and yet out of the corner of my eye, I would catch movement, my reflection stepping closer before I even looked directly at it. I could feel its presence behind the glass, pushing against the surface, as if testing the limits of its prison. The more I avoided it, the stronger it became. When I finally gathered the courage to face it again, its eyes didn't follow me like before. They met mine, instantly, unblinking, and filled with something almost human, something terrifyingly alive. It began to copy not just my movements, but my habits, my voice, my mannerisms, in ways that felt deliberate. When I spoke, I could see its lips moving a second before mine, like it was predicting what I was about to say. When I laughed, it didn't mimic me anymore. It reacted as if it understood the joke before I did. I could feel the gap between us closing day by day, like it was studying me, preparing for something I couldn't name. I started to dream about it every night, standing in the dark behind the glass, watching me sleep, its hands pressed flat against the inside of the mirror, its face expressionless as though it was waiting for permission to step through. I stopped using mirrors entirely, covered every reflective surface in my house, but it found ways to appear in other places, in the surface of a puddle, in the black screen of a phone, in the gleam of a window pane. No matter where I turned, I saw it there, smiling faintly, eyes glowing with that familiar cruel light. I tried to convince myself it was only guilt or madness or some trick of the mind. But then I began to notice other people reacting differently to me, friends hesitating when they spoke my name, strangers glancing twice, as if they saw something they couldn't place. I felt like I was slowly being replaced, piece by piece, from the inside out. The worst part was the sense of surrender that came with it. I began to move differently. My reflection had changed the rhythm of my body, and I followed without meaning to my posture, mirrored its. My expressions no longer felt like my own. Sometimes I would wake up standing before the mirror in the middle of the night without remembering how I got there, and in those moments I could see the faintest smile on its lips while mine stayed still. It was as if it was rehearsing, living, pretending until it was ready to take over completely. Every time I blinked, I feared it would move without me, that when I opened my eyes it would be standing on my side of the glass, and I would be trapped on the other. I began to speak to it without realizing it, asking it questions, begging it to stop, and sometimes it would nod slowly as though agreeing, but the more I spoke, the more I could feel myself fading, my words coming out softer, weaker, until I could no longer tell if it was me speaking or the reflection answering for me. The line between us thinned, until I started to wonder if maybe it had already happened. Maybe I was already the one behind the glass, watching someone else live my life. The isolation crept in slowly. At first it felt like a choice, a way to protect myself from what was happening. But before long it became a prison I built with my own hands. I stopped inviting people over. I stopped answering calls. I pulled away from the world because I couldn't let anyone see the fear that had begun to shape my face. I told myself it was temporary, that I just needed rest, that maybe, if I stayed away from mirrors, from reflections, from people, I could hold on to whatever was left of me. But isolation has a way of twisting time, and soon the days blurred together, the nights felt endless, and the silence began to whisper louder than anything else. The house felt heavier every day, the air thick and cold, as if the walls were closing in. I began to hear faint movements when I walked through the halls, the soft creak of floorboards. Behind me, even when I was still alone, I would glance at covered mirrors and see the faintest impressions moving under the sheets, as though something on the other side was shifting, trying to find me. Sometimes I thought I heard footsteps echoing my own, or breathing that matched my rhythm, but came half a second late. It was enough to drive me to the edge of reason. I started sleeping during the day, keeping the lights on, trying to avoid the quiet moments when the reflection felt closest. Friends tried to reach out. At first they sent messages, knocked on the door, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I was afraid of what they might see, afraid they would look at me and realize I wasn't fully me anymore. I saw it in their eyes, the few times they caught glimpses of me through the window, confusion mixed with unease. They couldn't say why, but they sensed something wrong. They said my voice sounded different, that I didn't look like myself anymore, that my expression seemed frozen even when I wasn't looking at them. And each word of concern pulled me further into fear, because I realized they were seeing what I had been denying. I began to lose my sense of what was real. Sometimes I would sit in my room staring at the walls and feel a presence behind me, like a cold current brushing the back of my neck. When I turned, there was nothing, but I could feel eyes watching from somewhere unseen. The covered mirror in the corner would twitch slightly, as if reacting to my movement. I tried to ignore it, but the urge to uncover it grew stronger with every passing hour. It was as if the reflection was calling me in silence, begging me to look again, to acknowledge it. I resisted for days, but each night the whispers returned, my name carried softly through the dark, and each time I felt weaker. The loneliness ate at me until I could no longer tell whether I was avoiding people or they were avoiding me. When I looked in my phone's black screen, I thought I saw movement behind me, but when I turned, nothing was there. Even when I left the house, the reflection seemed to follow me in every window, every polished surface, catching glimpses of that same faint smile that never reached the eyes. I started wearing sunglasses to avoid reflections in my own eyes, but even then I could feel it watching from beneath the surface of glass. Sleep became impossible. I would wake up in strange positions, sometimes standing near the mirror, even though I had fallen asleep far from it, sometimes sitting on the floor facing the covered glass with my hands resting on the fabric. As if waiting for something, I began to realize that isolation had not kept me safe. It had only made me easier to reach the reflection. No longer needed the noise of the world to find me. It had learned my rhythm, my silence, my breath. It lived within every quiet second and every dark room. The more I hid from everyone else, the closer it came, until my only company was its presence, the one thing I had tried so hard to escape. It happened one night when the house was darker than usual, the kind of darkness that felt alive, heavy, pressing against the skin. I had stopped looking in mirrors long ago, or at least I thought I had. But that night, something pulled me toward it, a quiet tug in my chest, like gravity calling me home. I walked into the room where it all began, and even though the mirror was still covered, I could feel the reflection waiting for me behind the fabric, patient, breathing, almost eager. The air was so cold I could see my breath rising in soft clouds, and for a moment I thought I heard a faint whisper, like my own voice calling me closer. My hands trembled as I reached out to touch the edge of the cloth. I didn't want to, but something inside me did, something that wasn't entirely mine. The fabric felt damp and icy, as though it had been absorbing the cold from within the glass. I hesitated, but then I pulled it away slowly, the cloth falling to the floor without a sound. And there it was, my reflection standing in perfect stillness, its expression calm, too calm, its eyes sharper than I remembered, glinting faintly as if catching light that didn't exist. It smiled, the same slow, deliberate smile I had come to dread, and I realized it wasn't copying me, because I hadn't smiled at all. For a long moment, neither of us moved, and then it tilted its head slightly as if examining me, deciding something. I felt a tightness in my chest, like the air between us had changed, like it had become something solid, heavy enough to suffocate. I tried to step back, but my legs didn't respond. I could feel the weight of its gaze locking me in place. The space around me felt thick, almost electric. The reflection began to move one slow step forward while I stayed frozen. My mind screamed to run, to look away, but my body was no longer listening. It was as if the reflection had reached through the glass and taken hold of me from the inside. The movement was smooth, unnatural, its body gliding toward the edge of the mirror, the surface rippling slightly, like water disturbed by a faint breeze. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My voice was trapped somewhere deep in my throat. I could feel the pull now stronger than before, like an invisible thread connecting us, like it was drawing me closer to it, or pulling itself closer to me. I tried to look away, to close my eyes, but even that small act of defiance felt impossible. The reflection's eyes held mine, and for the first time I saw something behind them, a flicker of life, or something pretending to be alive. The air grew heavier, the shadows stretched longer, the lights dimmed without reason, and the sound of my heartbeat filled the room. The reflection raised its hand, slowly pressing it against the glass. The surface rippled again, and I could feel the vibration in my own skin, as though our worlds were bleeding into each other. I wanted to step back, but instead my hand began to rise on its own, mirroring its movement, until my palm met the glass. The cold shot through me, sharp and biting, and for a second I swore I felt another pulse beating beneath my hand. Not mine, but its. Then I saw it move, its lips forming words I couldn't hear at first, and then the whisper came, faint, like a breath from the other side. It said my name the same way I would say it, and then it smiled, wider eyes glinting with something triumphant. That was the moment I realized it had never been a reflection at all. It was something else, something that had been waiting for me to break the barrier, to give it permission to step through. And as it leaned forward, the glass no longer looked solid. It shimmered like liquid, and I could see my own breath fogging the surface while its breath didn't. And in that single heartbeat, I understood it wasn't trapped anymore. It was free, and I was the one standing behind the glass. You said, And now when I walk past a mirror, I move quietly careful not to linger too long, not to let my gaze meet its surface because I know what waits there. I know that reflections are not as innocent as they seem. They remember, they watch, they hunger. I can feel it, even when I try not to think about it. That quiet weight pressing from the other side of the glass, the feeling of eyes that are not mine following every step, every breath, every heartbeat. It never goes away. No matter how many mirrors I cover, no matter how many lights I leave on at night, I used to believe that the reflection stopped existing when I looked away, that once I turned my back, the image faded into nothingness. But now I know that it doesn't disappear. It keeps moving, it keeps breathing, it keeps watching. Sometimes I see it in flashes, a glimpse of movement, in a window, a shape in the dark corner of a hallway. And for a split second, I think I see myself staring back, but the expression is wrong. The eyes are too calm, too knowing, too alive. I blink, and it's gone, but the fear stays lingering like smoke in my chest. There are nights when I wake up and the room feels colder than it should, when the air carries that familiar stillness, that silence that doesn't belong to the world of the living. I can feel something, standing near the mirror, watching, waiting for me to move. Sometimes, I think, I hear the faint sound of a whisper, soft and deliberate, like my own voice calling me from far away. And every time it happens, I tell myself not to answer, not to look, because I know if I do, it will be there waiting, wearing my face, smiling my smile. But with eyes that no longer belong to me, I've tried to break the mirrors, to shatter every surface that reflects me. But it doesn't matter, because reflections are everywhere, in the shine of a window, in the glint of water, in the darkness of another person's eyes. I can't escape it. I can't erase it. It follows me everywhere, patient, relentless, eternal. I see it when I least expect it, in fleeting moments when the world goes quiet, when I feel the weight of something unseen standing too close. I tell myself to keep walking, to never look back, because deep down, I know if I ever stare too long again, if I ever meet its gaze and let it smile back, it won't be me on this side anymore. Now I live in constant awareness, always one breath away from the glass, one heartbeat away from the truth, that something on the other side is waiting. And maybe it always was. Maybe it's been watching from the beginning, waiting for me to believe, waiting for me to doubt, waiting for me to finally understand that it isn't trapped behind the mirror anymore. It's free, it's moving, and I'm the one who's trapped, the one who never truly left the reflection behind.